Good evening. The full commission meeting occurring on May 10th, 2023 at the West Park Library will come to order at 6 o'clock p.m. Thank you so much for attending. Together we are co-creating a safer Cleveland, which will hopefully have profound consequences and long-term effects in the Cleveland Police Department. Change is never easy, and we often grow frustrated. But it is my hope that residents, commissioners, officers, elected officials, and every stakeholder remember that change is always possible, and it's just not an idealistic dream, but something that we all have the ability to do. In order to effectively implement change, we must accept that there are no myriad of perspectives and points of view. On most points of concern, we must be open-minded and listen. A healthier Cleveland can only occur when we hold stakeholders accountable towards their promises and mandates, but also find points of agreement and build bridges on our shared values to create positive change. It is the art of strategy, innovation, and collective brilliance that has the power to create a lasting change. Together, we can create a Cleveland which benefits officers and residents. It is my privilege and great pleasure to welcome you here today. The next item of business is a roll call. Commissioner Adams.
Present.
Commissioner Benito.
Present.
Commissioner Shura.
Present.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Present.
Commissioner Earley. Commissioner Garret Ferguson.
She sent a text that she's running.
She's on her way. Commissioner Kennedy.
Present.
Commissioner Reeves. He has an excused absence. Commissioner Ridgeway.
Present.
Commissioner Pete Van Leer.
Present.
Commissioner Rodriguez. Present. Commissioner Wang.
Present.
Commissioner Zaid. She has an excused absence as well. A quorum of commissioners needed to conduct business has been met. So we're going to do a quick meeting decorum. As we know, commissioners, please raise your hand and wait for recognitions by the chair. As we know that there are a number of us as commissioners, and please ensure that we all have the opportunity to speak. Please ensure that all conversations remain respectful in nature and that there are no side conversations occurring during the meeting. The next item of business is the approval of minutes. The minutes for April 12th were distributed for your review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Hence none. Should we take a vote? I can't remember. Oh. Since there are no objections, we're going to do unanimous consent. Please accept the minutes as read with flexibility if there's anything that comes later on. The minutes for April 26, 2023 were distributed for your review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Hence none. They will be approved as read with flexibility if anything should occur later. The next item on our agenda, we will hear the report from the Cleveland Police Monitoring Team, the 12th semi-annual report given by Ms. Ayesha Hardaway, past intern monitor.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. So I recognize that this is the first time that you all have, let's see, maybe if I turn it this way. I recognize that this is the first time that the charter-created commission has had the members of the monitoring team. I have with me here also Charles C., who, like me, has been a part of this project since 2015. But this is the first time. The consent decree requires the monitor to give a report out in addition to the semi-annual update that we do as a part of a public hearing with Judge Oliver. I know I saw several of you there this past March. We are also required to come before the commission and provide an update directly to you. So with that being said, thank you for the invitation and the space on your agenda for us to make sure that we have the time to do this. I have a few prepared remarks, and it's my understanding that perhaps there are some questions. It has typically been our custom to get questions beforehand from either the community, to the extent that there are any, or the commissioners. We never would know if they came from community or commissioners, but it would give us a chance and an opportunity to prepare. At the time when we used to do this, there were some areas of the consent decree that I didn't ever touch. That's no longer true, but nonetheless, the goal and the hope was that if we had specific questions on an area where Cleveland-based members weren't particularly specifically responsible for, that we could get that information and those answers and provide them to you in advance. I think I got word that perhaps, there you are. That perhaps there are a few questions that you all have. I want to just say that the report out that I'm giving today is for the period June 1st of 2022 to December 31st, 2022. It takes some time to write, edit, get feedback and thoughts from the parties, and then to publish the semi-annual report that we did produce in court, that we filed on PACER with Judge Oliver on the same day that we had that hearing on March 23rd, 2023. So with that being said, as you all are well aware, that this is a period of transition sorry, I am so used to watching my back. The setup of this room is very, very different. You got me, thank you. Somebody watch my back, please.
Also, you can sit here too, if that would be more comfortable for you.
I'm fine, thank you. This is a period of transition for the monitoring team. In November of 2022, in October, we got word unexpectedly that the lead monitor at that time was going to step down from the role. In the interest of making sure that the project continued with the pace and the rigor that we had all on the monitoring team grown very accustomed to keeping, I stepped in as interim monitor with the goal and focus of keeping the project moving and moving ahead at full steam. As a result, the report and the assessment from the report has as a result, the evaluation of the report spans the leadership of 2 monitors. And it's important for us to keep that be aware of that. But I am happy to report that that transition did not impact, again, the rigor or the pace of the work that we were able to do with the parties. And now, as of last month, you all are likely well aware that Carl Racine was appointed by Judge Oliver to serve as the new head monitor on the implementation of the consent decree requirements and working with the parties on that aim, as well as assessing the City of Cleveland's progress towards those requirements. And so I thought it might be most helpful if I talked about 3 areas of the consent decree. One being the CPC, since I'm here with the CPC. The other being CPOP. And then finally, accountability. As detailed in the report, I recognize that the CPC is also in the midst of a transition during this time. The consent decree created commission had its last public meeting in May of 2022, which me and other members of the monitoring team were present for. But during the time period that I told you is the reporting period relevant for the 12th semi-annual report, there were no meetings and there was no activity. I don't have to tell you all, you were living, right? The application, selection, right, appointment, and all of that for the last half of the year. And so we watched from the sidelines, but you all lived it. And as a result, where the former CPC had achieved various levels of compliance, right? You all probably may or may not have noticed that those levels of compliance were not sustained during the relevant reporting period. I don't want that to be alarming to anyone, and it's certainly not indicative of anything because you all weren't even doing the you weren't present to do the work. But as a result, the 13 areas that are evaluated in the 12th semi-annual report, there were 2 that were in general compliance, 1 that was in partial compliance, and then the remainder 10 were downgraded to non-compliance. But I know that there's a lot of foundation building and infrastructure training and other things that you all have been doing since your appointment. I look forward to seeing all of the work that you plan to do and will do, and am grateful to your commitment and your sacrifice, not just to fulfill the obligations under the consent decree, but in service to our community. So thank you. Maybe I should stop and ask, break our rule. I don't know, should I ask if there are any questions as it relates to the CPC?
Any questions at this time?
Not that
Chair
there has to
Ridgeway.
be, but-
To the chair, and we appreciate how you were able to explain how these 13 areas, you know, were so designated. But I would also like to acknowledge that the Chief Ethics Officer really did a great job before Judge Oliver in terms of explaining why we were in non-compliance on a lot of these areas, and made a point of sharing that we were in fact part of this was we were in organizing onboarding processes, and that we were preparing to be able to move forward. So I did want to acknowledge that because I think that was important, and I think your comments a few minutes ago supported his presentation to the judge that night.
Yeah, no disagreement between us and the city on those points. Okay. On CPOP, if I could pivot there really quickly, there are 8 consent decree requirements that are evaluated under this section. 6 of the items are found to be in partial compliance. 1 was found to be in both operational and partial compliance, and then 1 in non-compliance. And I remain encouraged about, maybe it's appropriate for me to just share briefly sort of what the division has done as it relates to CPOP. They have training that has been completed over the last few years on CPOP, the creation of a data collection form that officers have to fill out to identify the ways and the areas in which they engage in community problem-oriented policing. That's CPOP. I'm sorry, I should have said that at the outset. And then they've also listed or identified in a report that they create a number of community organizations that they have partnerships with. As you could tell in our report, our goal and our desire is for the division to move to a place where they're not just identifying the organizations that they're partnering with, but that they're developing plans and talking about the strategic work that they're doing as evidence of the partnerships, if you will. We have on the monitoring team a former chief of police who was actually around at the time when CPOP was formulated and developed as a theory, and has spent a lot of time talking with the training section most recently on sort of like what CPOP really is. He uses this great analogy about it being like sort of like dating and moving from dating to marriage. And when he talked about it, I could see light bulbs go off in not just for all participants, the DOJ monitoring team as well as the city. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing where the division moves with CPOP, with additional technical assistance and implementation support. Questions on CPOP? Okay. Can you hand me this stack so I don't have to toggle? You were kind enough to give a handout. It's right there on my chair. You see that? Yeah, there's, oh, yeah, and underneath it. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. For the Office of Professional Standards, there are 36 areas, and I think instead of going through all of the detail there, I think the major takeaway for the Office of Professional Standards is that there remains a lot of work to do in order to ensure that some of the infrastructure that was built immediately preceding and during the leadership of former OPS administrator, Roger Smith, thank you, Roger Smith, that framework, that infrastructure is built upon. There have been, over the course of the last 2 years or so, several interim administrators, the loss of staff, retirements of investigators, which is to be expected, but also the loss of a very strong data analyst. I know that they've now hired a data analyst, a general manager, and so with key leadership positions and even just general staff function positions not in place, we've seen some backtracking, if you will, and so that remains of great concern to the monitoring team. You all heard us talk about that in court, those of you who were there. And there, as you all know, I think this past week, last week, the new OPS administrator has arrived in Cleveland, and so the monitoring team will be working to evaluate what progress is made in that space. Anything on OPS? The PR, oh, sorry, no, chair, okay, co-chair, okay, sorry. The PRB, which is a key function of OPS and very closely connected to the work of the commission, requires strong leadership at OPS in terms of the presentation of the investigations, in terms of the tracking of the investigations, the notifications to subject officers as well as complainants, and then the following up of sustained violations and the documentation of that to the chief of police or the director of public safety as appropriate. And so it is, again, our hope that to the extent that the new OPS administrator and his leadership is, and the onboarding of additional staff like the data analyst, that will create a strong opportunity for the PRB to fully embrace its role as required now under the, as redefined under the charter, but certainly as of great concern to the monitoring team under the consent decree. The last thing I said I was going to talk about was internal affairs. Was internal affairs. That is, as you all know, because you all have gotten all of this wonderful training, you know that internal affairs, where the Office of Professional Standards investigates civilian complaints that come to that office from community members, that internal affairs also can investigate complaints from community members, but more often is evaluating or investigating internally discovered misconduct. After a period of time without a full or a permanent internal affairs superintendent, before the end of 2 reporting periods ago, Superintendent Bakeman came on board and is now the superintendent for internal affairs. We have been working with internal affairs on ensuring that, and OPS and PRB, to revise their manuals to make sure that they're in not just compliance with the consent decree, but obviously the charter section, of course, and that they have adequate training. There's some staffing issues there, and so that they're just to ensure that their staff is trained in best practices on how to conduct investigations, interviews, and then reporting as it relates to those investigations. So that remains an area of great concern or focus of the monitoring team. I shouldn't say concern. I don't mean that in the same way as what I said about OPS. Let me be very, very clear. But nonetheless, we continue to watch it, as with everything else.
Commissioner Pete Van Leer.
Sorry, I stole your mic.
All right. So I do have a question, but it's more going back to the CPC. I just was taking a minute to formulate it. So in the interim report, the 12th annual monitoring team report, I should say semi-annual report, not interim, there were concerns raised about discipline for CDP. And when I look at the report as it relates to the CPC, I don't see discipline directly mentioned there. But I'm wondering how you, and maybe this is a question you have to back to me on, but how you as a past interim monitor and your involvement with that work see the role of this commission in terms of looking at discipline policies and practice at CDP and where that work, you know, if you have ideas about how we should be focusing that work, how you see the role of this entity.
No, I think that's a really good question, and I think the short answer is that now that you all are seated, right, that you, I hope, feel somewhat like you're getting your sea legs underneath you, that there needs to be some conversation between the parties, including the CPC, right, and the monitoring team about what direction you decide to go or you're interested in going in creating those apparatuses? I don't know what else to call, right? Like how you want to put the frame on your review of discipline, how you want to fulfill your obligations under the charter, right? The original consent decree didn't have that. It was more so policy training, right? Didn't have the discipline piece in the way that the charter does. But nevertheless, right now that it's here, I think, and as we did with the consent decree created commission, right, having those conversations with the CPC as what I used to call a super stakeholder. Now I'll just say like I guess it's the same, right? Super stakeholder of the consent decree. The need for us to find time to be in conversation and development planning with you all, but it's not something that we would ever prescribe to you, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Commissioner Benito.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hardaway, for being here. I had a question kind of that relates to the consent decree as a whole. And
I'm having a hard time hearing you, just so you know.
The mics feel a little quieter today. I don't know why. Oh, yeah. Beautiful high ceilings. Okay. Also, is it Dr. Hardaway?
Oh,
or
Professor Hardaway is fine.
Professor Hardaway. Okay, thank you, Professor Hardaway. So I was hoping it would be okay if I could ask you a general question about the consent decree, if that's okay. And there are like a number of different places in the consent decree where it, specifically says CDP, and then it says things like the CRB or CPC or the commission. And then there's a number of places where it just generally says the city.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could kind of help me understand, like, because a lot of these other groups are under the city, when it says the city, is it referring to everybody, or has that language changed at all through the reiterations of the consent decree? Okay.
It did, yeah. So in the modification of the consent decree following the passage of issue 24, now section 115, the parties collaborated on revising the language of the consent decree. And they made the decision, and I was a part of observing those conversations and those negotiations. They made the decision that in many places, simply saying the city would be the easiest way of identifying who the responsible party was, with then the city law department or CDP or whoever, right, identifying or being really clear about which department, which unit, which stakeholder under the city, right, is responsible for a deliverable. But this is, right, a lawsuit that was originally filed in federal court, right, resulted in a consent decree, and the party to that lawsuit is the city. Okay. I hope that helps. Yeah. But, you know, in some places where you're talking about the CPC, it might be a little bit ridiculous to say the city when we know we're specifically talking about the CPC, right? Or to say IA when you're talking specifically about an IA deliverable. I hope that helps.
It definitely does. I think part of what as we are kind of all figuring out where all the different apparatuses, how they work together, I think that was something that I was kind of reading through the consent decrees, trying to figure out, okay, is this a potential area that we, like are involved in some way? And so that was a really helpful explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, and there may be, right, in those places where you see the city, there may be, like, the easiest way to say, to address it was to say the city fully understanding and recognizing that there has to be some coordination across all of the accountability structures, let's say, right, of the consent decree, and that in that space we're saying OPS, PRB, right, CPC, right, but ultimately the city, yeah.
Chair Ridgeway.
I'm glad you touched on that last, within that last sentence, because I think that sometimes our concept of an independent, that we're independent, we don't often see that that independence still requires, under the consent decree, collaboration and coordination sometimes with these other units that have been established because of the consent decree, like the Police Review Board, OPS, whatever. So could you talk a little bit about the intent? I mean, our independence versus a requirement for us to work collaboratively with these other agencies and organizations in order for us to accomplish the mandates of the consent decree.
So let me just say very clearly that the monitoring team was not a part of drafting the general, like the consent decree, the settlement agreement that is now a consent decree once it was approved by Judge Oliver. We didn't even exist yet, right? And so that in 2015, right, 2014, 2015, the city and the Department of Justice engaged in the creation of that. So I can't speak to the intent of anything, but I can say from a monitoring perspective, right, exactly what you touched on is critical, right? Like thinking about ensuring that various stakeholders or units within the city are working collaboratively and coming up with systems and structures, right, processes to ensure that the mandates of the consent decree are effectively and efficiently carried out, right, is something that a monitor or a monitoring team will be evaluating.
Commissioner Wang.
I have just a request because Commissioner Van Leer and I collaborated on some questions, and if we can just ask them jointly because they are focused on the same topic, if that will be okay. Commissioner Van Leer, do you want to start? No? Okay. We've, and I hope this is, and Professor Hardaway, I hope this doesn't come out of left field because I did CC you on this email. We recently interviewed a candidate that was originally called the Police Inspector General in the consent decree. It's now become the Public Safety Inspector General. So we noticed that there were not only differences in the job descriptions, but that specifically it had been moved from the Chief of Police as the supervisor to the Director of Public Safety. With broader responsibilities, but then decreased specific job responsibilities, managing 5 divisions rather than just police as designated in the consent decree. So I just wanted I noticed that in the monitoring report that the team found this change laudable. Could you explain what benefits come of it and what you know about how this decision was made and communicated with the monitoring team and the DOJ and the judge? Because my understanding is that many members of the community were not aware of this change, and we were unfortunately not seated at that time to have any oversight over this.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, oh, let's see. I found it. I just want context for. No, it's actually page 58. Thank you. Right, and so what we recount there on page 58 is the process by which the job was posted. I don't see anywhere where this report opines as to what was laudable or not. Do you have a citation or a page for that? Quote?
It's actually Mr. Van Leer's.
Yeah, it's on page 38. It says, page 38, although the city laudably decided to move the Inspector General position from being under the police department, or chief of police, supervision of the chief of police to that of the director of public safety.
That's helpful. Can I get you to stop right there?
Okay.
Right, because that is in reference to the reporting structure. I think Commissioner Wang, what I heard you speaking about was about the job descriptions and the scope of the work, right? And what that section that we're talking about is the reporting structure. So let me just finish really quickly. So if there were prior concerns articulated in prior reports, right, that the Inspector General had to report to the Chief of Police, who the Inspector General was also responsible for observing, right, assessing, and perhaps critiquing. So that is what the laudable reference, characterization is referencing. I did receive your email and others' emails on this topic. Because this is something I hope you were present at the first time when I addressed the commission and sort of the general role of the monitoring team. Because this is something that will likely be put in front of the judge, I hope you'll respect that I'm not able to say anything more than what we've already said in reports and answer specific questions about issues that are raised, because we do serve, right, as an agent of the court, and I never want to speak before him, instead of him, or anything like that. So let's let this particular issue that is percolating now, and will likely need some input from the judge, see its way through the process before I'm asked to opine on it prematurely, if that's okay.
Could I just ask a non-legal, I understand that the judge, it may go, could you tell us who was present when this decision was made? Was it an agreement between the DOJ and the city? Or was it something like, oh, we might change some things and the city changed the job description out afterwards? Just maybe a timeline would be helpful as to how these changes? Sorry to put you on.
No, it's fine. I mean, I don't know that I would be able to give that without prior sort of conversation with the parties and the judge, but I will just tell you as I sit here right now, all of the things that live in here, that timeline isn't readily available to me, even if I wanted to give it to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any further questions? We have executive director.
Clarifying point on that about the ID. It doesn't, whether you change your job description or not, it doesn't absolve the requirements of the consent decree, right? So
Oh, God, no.
those are in there. So I think some people are concerned that the change in the job description means that the consent decree requirements won't be met or don't have to be met. But what I opine on that is that it doesn't matter what you write in the job description, you still have to meet the requirements of the consent decree under the Inspector General. Is that correct?
The consent decree, oh, I'm hitting this as if it's it, but it's actually in my laptop. The consent decree is the consent decree, changing that, as you all saw with the creation of the charter commission, right, requires approval of the judge.
Commissioner Garret Ferguson.
Sorry, because I don't know if you can answer this question. If you can't, it's fine. I think the part that I was most confused about with the job description was that the expanded powers overseeing police, fire, EMS, because on that page 58 where it says that the monitoring team agreed with some changes, it doesn't explicitly list out EMS, fire, and police. And so I guess my question was, did you all know that the Inspector General's role would then oversee those would deal with those three departments in that capacity? Because those three departments just aren't listed, and so I just had questions about that.
I spent a lot of time writing and revising this thing, so I would say what the words say on the paper is exactly what there is.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further questions? We have Chief of Ethics, Delonte Spencer Thomas, if he would like to come to the mic.
Okay. Does that mean I'm done? Oh, he's asking a question. Okay.
I was going to provide some additional clarity on this IG piece, but I wanted to wait to see if there were any other questions.
Am I done? Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. So let's ensure that, do we have any further questions for Professor Hardaway? Okay, thank you so much. So if you could please step to the mic.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Am I on here? Hello, no.
If it's red, it's on.
Hello. Test. No. 1, 2.
We're working that out. Somebody had messaged that they couldn't hear your statement. No, Jason's. So I guess we have to speak from these mics.
Test. Test. It was just the volume on the bottom.
So while you have it, somebody asked me if you could repeat your statement because they couldn't hear on live stream. And then we can have.
Yeah, the statement I asked is if the job description changes the obligation to meet the consent decree requirements of the Inspector General.
And you said it doesn't, they still have to meet those requirements in the consent decree despite any changes. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Commissioners. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you to you all who participated, in this process for selecting the Inspector General. So this is, something we've been working on for quite some time from the city standpoint. I wanted to just provide some context and clarity. I mean, we've also received the questions as well. So I want to give the perspective that we can. The decision to change, of course, stemmed out of the reporting structure, right? So that was certainly a concern, as Professor Hardaway indicated. And then it was under the leadership of the Public Safety Director to expand the job description. When the job description was posted, this was something that was sent to the parties. This was something that we had been working on. And so it wasn't something that the city did post haste or did unilaterally. The job description was sent. We also came up with a formal hiring plan or hiring process plan for this position that was requested by the monitoring team, and we provided to the monitoring team in advance of us actually proceeding through the interview and application process. So this is something that we had been working on together. And also I want to, I guess, just add that in terms of the actual language of the consent decree. So this was a question that was also brought up internally as well. Specifically is, hey, if we've all been in alignment or in understanding that this is going to be the role of the IG, then we need to go back and discuss an amendment to the language of the consent decree. We more recently had a conversation and both the Department of Justice and the city agreed to have an offline conversation about language to officially adjust or amend the language in the consent decree to reflect how we're actually operating in this space. And so that's kind of where we are now. So again, we've been operating in alignment with this Public Safety Inspector General position, with every intention to amend the language and put before the judge so that a formal amendment can be made.
Commissioner Wang?
Thank you so much. So if I can, since I have you here, if I could dive a little bit deeper into this. I made a table of the differences between the amended consent decree as it stands now, a 2021 job description for the Police Inspector General, and then the 2022 Public Safety Inspector General position. And so I just wanted to know a few key differences, as we already noted that it's changing from the Chief of Police to the Public Safety Inspector. And it has, before it was a Police Inspector General, and now it is for 5 divisions: fire, EMS, animal control, and corrections in addition. However, it should be noted that the salary decreased from 85 to 115 to 74 to 99. So even though it does seem to appear at face value to have a broader kind of supervisory responsibility, it was a little confounding to me that it represented a $12,000 decrease. As I went through with the table side by side of the elements that were in the consent decree and in the 2021 description, I'm concerned that the major differences have to do with discipline, including, for example, the stuff that is missing from the current job description are whether these assessing of policies and practices and determining whether they are achieving the goals of the consent decree. An entire section F of paragraph 253 of the consent decree, which talks about analyzing investigations conducted by OPS to determine whether they are timely, complete, thorough, and whether recommended dispositions are supported by the preponderance of the evidence. That's completely absent in the 2022 job description. And then there's little tweaks that seem to me, at least from a layman's perspective, reading this, additions that take away the independent power of the IG, for example, to make reports and recommendations available to the public. That's in the consent decree. Now it says when appropriate. And considering that he or she is going to be responding to the public safety director. So I'm guessing maybe I'm spotting a pattern that's not there. But why to your recollection, were you involved in who reworded this consent or this job description, and what was the reason for these omissions and changes? And especially because it seems like the job, and overall the job seems to have a lower pay grade, suggestive of itself, lower job responsibilities, and certainly a decrease in that. When was this change made, and who made it, and what was the discussion involved in it, and what was the rationale? Sorry to give you all those questions, but I think you generally understand where I'm coming from. Thank you.
So the Department of Public Safety ultimately drafted the description, as this is a position that will be housed in the Department of Public Safety, reporting to the Public Safety Director. So in terms of specific detail, in terms of job duties and responsibilities, that was something that was determined by the Department of Public Safety. You know, what I can say is that this is something that has been shared and has been put out there, and again, we are working through, and you know, full disclosure, there are certainly there are additional challenges and things that will come up. So, for example, one conversation is making sure that we want to make sure that the Inspector General position or this function is supported to be able to handle working on matters in addition to issues within the Division of Police. So the idea was not to just expand the function for just one person to have to do, but that this person would be impaneled with support to be able to carry out its function. And again, I just want to emphasize that this is a description that was shared, that has been worked on, or at the very least seen by the parties with respect to the consent decree, and we're working on making sure the language matches up there. To my understanding, there was no intention to evade any of the requirements of the consent decree by changing the job description. It simply was about making this position or this role, particularly as we look at again the passage of issue 24 and the positions created by issue 24, i.e. this commission, the expanded or different powers from the CPRB and for the Office of Professional Standards. And so those things collectively, and now I'm kind of going slightly into my own opinion, but these things collectively, I think, called for somewhat of a different responsibility or a broader responsibility that ultimately could pair well with our existing entities. And so we're working to how we unify that, right? So I say that to say, there is limited need for for 10 different entities to all be looking at the same things in the same ways, right? And so same way that the Community Police Commission onboarding or passage through issue 24, now Charter Amendment 115, that also changed the consent decree language, right? We amended the consent decree to reflect how we're going to be operating, right? And so this will look similar to that. So in terms of the differences between the job descriptions, what I will say in some, again, or repeat in some, is that the intent was not to evade any obligation under the consent decree, but to make sure that we had a oversight structure that is representative of how we're actually functioning and how we're best able to move forward.
Okay, so I just had a follow-up, maybe to focus us a little bit. So could you, in the most kind of glaring example, 253F, the paragraph about OPS is completely missing from the 2022 job description. It is present in its full form in the 2021 job description. So obviously that had to be removed. Are you aware who removed it, and what was the rationale? To repeat again, paragraph F says analyze investigations conducted by OPS to determine whether they are timely, complete, thorough, and whether recommended dispositions are supported by the preponderance of the evidence. Removing that, there's no other mention of OPS. What do you envision now in the new job description? What is the interaction between the PSIG, Public Safety Inspector General, and OPS? Will there be no connection? Will they not analyze OPS investigations? I just want clarity, because if it's not there and it is one paragraph by itself in the consent decree, the other question I have is, you said that you're going to appear before the judge and try to amend this. Are we planning to take out paragraph subsection F completely?
So with respect to the Office of Professional Standards, I want to be clear that one of the other things that, again, the Charter Amendment did is that it removed the Office of Professional Standards from the Department of Public Safety. So it is no longer a in-house entity, right, that ultimately has that layer of oversight that it had before, right? So prior to the amendment change, the Department of Public Safety had that authority to be able to to exercise oversight over OPS. That is no longer the case. So that would also go to this role. This role is also going to be within the Department of Public Safety. Then that oversight of OPS has to look a little bit different. But I will say that again, even that mention or that change in the job description, the 2022 version does not absolve or otherwise limit the IG from being able to look at systemic issues related to the Division of Police, Fire, EMS, et cetera. So if there are matters that come out of OPS that fall within that, right, that the IG can reasonably look into those for systemic issues, then that would be fair game for the IG as well.
So I'm sorry if I'm belaboring this point. So will they or will they not look at the OPS investigations, this PSIG role?
The answer is maybe. And what I mean by that is if OPS ultimately conducts investigations that fall within the jurisdiction of the IG, they will have the authority to be able to look at those issues. But I want to be very, very clear that because OPS is an independent entity per the charter amendment, they don't have the same oversight structure as they once had.
Okay, so, but the data will be, I mean, we don't have anybody from OPS. I mean, certainly everybody wants to look at the evidence holistically. Whether he has supervision over these investigations, that there's probably information and data that would be important from the OPS investigation. So,
Absolutely,
What do you
absolutely,
mean
and
by
the IG
jurisdiction?
would be able to look at that data to compile its reports that is within its jurisdiction to compile and produce.
okay, thank you so much.
Commissioner Garret Ferguson.
Thank you. So I understand what you're saying since it's, these changes have taken place and you guys are looking to do the amendment. So I have a two-part question. Does that then mean that this PSIG position should also be independent so that it can still maintain that standard that was set in the consent decree? And then also, when are you guys looking to update the amendment, to provide the amendment to the courts? Are you looking to do it at the next status hearing? Like, when is that, what is that timeline? But also, does that mean that now this position should probably be independent from the public safety director?
So to the independence, to the independence question. So, you know, the executive branch does not have the authority by itself to create a independent office that reports outside of it, right? So that's something that would need to happen by a charter amendment, by a ballot initiative, right? Something like that would need to come forward in order to create an entity. So for example, the executive branch only has the power within the executive branch, right? So it can't create an office that can report outside of it.
No, not like that, but I'm saying removing that position from under the authority of the public safety director and putting it, so like having it exist somewhere else in the structure so that it can still meet the criteria set in the consent decree. Because the consent decree, it says it is supposed to be able to oversee OPS, and now OPS is independent. So is there a way that position can then be overseen by another department that is not the director of public safety, so that it can be in alignment with what the consent decree wants?
Gotcha. No. So I think I understand your question correctly, and I think the answer is still that because OPS's authority now exists by charter, then there will also need to be a charter amendment that now gives you know, the public safety IG the authority to oversee or otherwise you know, supervise or oversee the Office of Professional Standards.
So without that charter amendment and the way it stands now, doesn't that put us in a position where we are out of compliance with the consent decree?
So again, that's why an amendment to the consent decree is something that would be necessary to make sure that it falls in line with what we are obligated and otherwise responsible to take care of. So again, same way that we, again, had to amend this consent decree after 115 to allow for the structure of this commission, of OPS, of CPRB, the same would need to happen in that respect.
So what is the timeline that we are thinking of putting this amendment forward? And then who are all of the entities that are going to be a part of drafting this amendment?
So that falls to the parties of the consent decree, right? So the Department of Justice and the city. And so with it being a court case, right, these filings would ultimately be between the law department and Department of Justice.
Do we have a timeline at all?
So the last conversation we had was last week on this, or no, this was actually earlier this week. The Department of Justice, we agreed to meet sooner rather than later. We did not put a date on that just yet, but we acknowledged that we needed to meet this needed to be an urgent matter and push to the priority list to make sure that we are functioning and we are in alignment with the consent decree.
Okay, thank you.
Audrianna.
Commissioner Wang.
So I did want to give the public some context about the two job descriptions I mentioned. In 2021, according to the monitor's report, for the job description that is more comporting with the consent decree, 117 applications were received, 98 were deemed qualified, but unfortunately 0 were found suitable. I'm not making any accusations, but seems statistically unlikely. Now we're in this new 2022 job description. I think we received 42 or 46 applicants, and 6 were selected, 4 responded, but unfortunately a few dropped out, and the CPC was only able to interview 1 single candidate. My concern is in paragraph 250 of the consent decree. It says that the city will seek the commission's input in developing the minimum qualifications and experience for an inspector general. Could you explain to us what you think that means? And also, the timeline that Ms. Garret Ferguson is asking for seems important to me, because it appears that the new language of the new job description was put forward into the public and solicited for applications before the amendments were made to the consent decree, before we even appeared before the judge with those amendments. What will we do if the judge does not approve these amendments? So those are my 2 questions. What is the commission's role in this entire process according to the consent decree? And why was the job description changed before even interactions with the judge and the DOJ?
So, as far as the consent, or excuse me, as far as the commission's role in this, we're following the language of 115 that provides that the commission would provide recommendation or recommendations on the inspector general position to the mayor. Admittedly, that one of the things that was also highlighted or noticed was that it explicitly just says inspector general. It doesn't specifically say police, although when the charter language was drafted, it was referring to the police inspector general because that's what existed at the time. But again, in an effort to make sure that we complied and also worked collaboratively, essentially the takeaway was making sure that the commission was involved in and able to provide recommendations. And so with respect to how the process played out, again, as was indicated to each of the commissioners, we ultimately, so to your point, we received 46 applications, and interviewed 6, or excuse me, identified 6, 4 selected, or 4 we reached out to and offered interviews for, and the way it rolled out, we ended up with one candidate to present to the commission. But it was of no fault of the candidates that the other candidates dropped out, and we certainly didn't want to curtail or otherwise run afoul the process, specifically the hiring plan process that we had already submitted to the monitoring team. Or otherwise potentially miss out on a uniquely qualified candidate. And so we thought it was best to still move forward, knowing that if the ultimate goal is, or the ultimate disposition here is to go back to the drawing board, then we would have to do that. But again, so that's kind of to the first piece. To your second question, I can't speak because I wasn't here at the time to be able to speak to, when specifically the job description was changed, or those specific language things.
I think it was released in October 2022. Were you working at the city at that point?
So no, the position, yes, I was with the city at that point, but the position had already been retooled as a public safety inspector general position. So when it went back out in October of 2022, that was the second time that we had released it, because when we previously released it, we did not identify candidates that we felt were suitable to move forward in the role.
Right, so I guess I was referring to a paragraph, if it was unclear, it was not the charter, but the consent decree, paragraph 250, that says the city will seek the commission's input in developing the minimum qualification experience for an inspector general. If you could answer that part. And my other concern is you said that you moved forward on the single candidate that seemed to be uniquely qualified. However, in his interview, he openly stated that he has no fire EMS supervisory or kind of investigative experience. He's currently, I think most of his experience is as basically like an OPS investigator in New York City. So I guess I'm not understanding how he was uniquely qualified then when he is not able to meet the minimum requirements for two divisions.
Well, I will agree to disagree on that point. What we were looking for, and I absolutely don't want to belabor this, because again, this falls within the purview of the Department of Public Safety, so I don't want to speak out of turn there. So I'm actually not going to answer that directly in terms of the qualifications of that candidate, right? The commission was able to provide its feedback, and that feedback will be ultimately reviewed by the mayor, and the chief director of public safety, and the mayor will ultimately make a call on that in terms of the qualifications of that particular candidate. What I can say with respect to the language of the consent decree, again, the decree was ultimately rooted in this being a police inspector general position, which more aptly warranted some of the language there. But again, all of this comes around the conversations that the city and the DOJ needs to have regarding the amendment to the consent decree to reflect how we're actually moving.
A final comment. Thank you so much. We have Commissioner Benito.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer Thomas. Always a pleasure, and thank you. We like to have lively conversations here, so thank you for being with us. I wanted to go back to the point about the part that's missing from the 2022 job description around analyzing investigation conducted by OPS. You brought up a really interesting point about, that with the change of the reporting structure, that not just the change of the reporting structure, but also the change of OPS now being independent, that played a role in it. And I think, but one thing that I was thinking about is the consent decree was amended after the passage of issue 24 to reflect the new changes under Charter 115, and that was still left in around the, the current language under the police inspector general still doing that. And so I guess part one of my question is, do you think that was an oversight that wasn't changed when the other changes were made to reflect the changes that came with Charter 115? And then, because I think what I'm more concerned about the idea of OPS investigations being analyzed because, to determine whether they're timely, complete, thorough, and whether the dispositions are supported, especially because we know that there is such a backlog right now in OPS investigations and in the backlog of completed OPS investigations that are waiting to be heard by the PRB. And so to me, this seems like an important function to disappear when there are, and one of the things that came up in the interview with the candidate was talking about, what are some things that, potentially that position could do to help support the functioning of OPS to make sure that we're able to fill that backlog and to make sure it's functioning well. And so, and in the consent decree, there really does seem to be a separation between what the OPS administrator does, which is like internal management of those things, and then what the inspector general is doing, which is analyzing how that function is doing, and it's under the transparency and oversight section, which makes me think that this is meant to create an additional level of oversight and transparency of what's happening within OPS, and to make sure that they're, and not just like that they're doing their job correctly, but they're getting the support that they need. And so I guess my first question that I already said, but I'll repeat it for clarity, is like, was that an oversight that was left in? And then two is, with the changes that, you're saying that this is a response to the shifting, and I get there's a lot of different overlapping bodies that are all going to have to work together, and so I think that this can be a collaborative process that we can all work together to make sure that the functions of the consent decree, that we fill them in our different functions. But do you see that analyzing process that is Section F under the Police Inspector General, part of the consent decree, do you see that being filled under one of the other bodies? Or is that just something that maybe isn't yet to be determined?
So to the first question with respect to the amendment to the consent decree, so again, that was done in March of 2022. And so I can't say as to whether or not that was an oversight, whether it was even brought up or not. I can just say that we have recognized that there's a need to address this issue between the parties, and we absolutely intend to do so, regardless of how that plays out. With respect to that specific function, I agree that it's important, right, that we be able to look into those issues. I just want to be clear that, because of the way that the charter is structured, right, we cannot give, that direct oversight. Now, looking into matters, looking into or performing investigatory functions, again, that will be ultimately up to the Director of Public Safety in terms of how the director will direct the IG to look at matters, whether or not there's any conflict there between OPS reporting to the CPRB. That will be a matter to play out in that regard. So I wouldn't be able to speak to that today. I can just say that, I think we all are in agreement that being able to look into our investigatory bodies will be crucial, right? And we will need to figure out together, where is it and who is best appropriate to look at that, right? The same question will come before this commission, right? When you perform your evidentiary hearings, there will be a question as to who can look into making sure that you're doing that right or timely or accurately, right? So these questions are certainly not novel and will need to be addressed. But I think as a catch-all, these are the growing pains of such monumental changes in a pretty short amount of time, and we will need to work together to figure that out, and the city is committed to doing that.
Thank you, and we're excited to work with you on that as well.
Thank you. So I don't know. So we're going to open it to public comment. So if there's anybody that would like to share a voice or concern, as always, please step to the mic. Best practice is that we may not address it in the moment. You can always follow Ms. Shelley or any of the staff if you feel more comfortable with them. And you know, this will occur for like approximately like 30 minutes or so, depending on the amount of comments we receive. Please feel free to step up to the mic.
Whoop. Okay, I'm not going to touch it. Hi, I'm Kayla. This is not on topic to anything that was particularly discussed today. So as a side note, as in coming to these meetings, I am still learning and trying to figure out as a community member what the most effective role is that I can play, that we can play. I'm curious, and this is not probably a question that will be answered today, but if as a body, you guys are our you're our representatives. We didn't elect you, but you are our representatives and you're our leaders. And so I am curious what you want from us in terms of how you want us to communicate with you, what the most effective way would be to collaborate with you, express our, there's obviously, you know, a way to communicate our concerns or our questions to you guys, like that's pretty clear, but a lot of the time I've heard sort of, you know, people say kind of, we need the community to push us and direct us, and are you expecting people to come and have, you know, highlighted the consent decree, read it at full length and sort of dove into it in the way that you guys do and have? Is that not what you expect? I guess my question is, it's quite broad and doesn't have a clear answer today, certainly, but I kind of want to open a dialogue in some way about what it is, like in a very constructive way, that the community can do to work with you guys to have concerns addressed. That's it. That's what I got.
Thank you. And there's various work groups that we will start. So I know we typically, so there's different work groups. We're going to open up our committees, and once we start moving and setting our agenda as past monitor, Professor Hardaway has stated, there will be work groups that will be formed, and that's a way to get involved throughout the, during certain times. We might have assessments or policies, and we want your feedback on, as well as a community survey. Definitely want your input. Definitely share with your network. So those are just quick general answers. Continue to learn and engage, and we're so glad to have you. Is there any other comments at this time?
No. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Part comment, part question. Comment number one, it does seem a bit odd that if you're offering $115,000 a year and for to supervise or oversee one department and you have 98 applicants, it seems kind of odd that you wouldn't find one person in that group of 98 applicants who's qualified for the position. Then two, you would drop the position to a lower amount and have fewer applicants, and in that pool, you find applicants who are qualified. I don't understand that. And of course, going along with that comment, I'm not truly understanding how, if you're going to have one person handle one division, and you think that that's going to be a full-time job, how do you think that that one person can handle 5 divisions and have all of their attention divided amongst 5 separate divisions for less pay? It doesn't seem as though you're going to get the best applicant for that type of position. So my question then becomes, if the two parties, the city and the DOJ, are already planning to go back to court to change some language so that you can comport with this new job description, it sounds almost like you're looking to change other language as well. And so my question would be, are you planning on changing 17D out of the consent decree also?
Does somebody want to answer that question? Or no? Okay, great.
So to the extent that I can answer some of this. So again, as I mentioned, the goal is not to have one person that looks into one division and that same one person now looks into these several different units. The plan is to absolutely make sure that this function, this IG function, has the support it needs to be able to adequately look at these different divisions. With respect to the application, period. So again, one of the things that was different in how we promoted for this position the second time around is that it was a much more targeted effort. So as opposed to broadly posting this the job description on Indeed, this was something that the second time around we explicitly sent to civilian oversight communities, right? We advertised with the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. We advertised with the Association of Inspectors General. These were things that were not done with the first job posting, which ultimately spurred a number of applicants that were just completely unqualified for this type of position, and probably because they didn't understand the position, right? I mean, I come from, prior to coming to the city in this ethics capacity, I come from the Inspector General community. I mean, and it's a close-knit community. It's a small community where those of us who are familiar with it know that until you get into it, you kind of have no idea what this actually really means. You hear the words and you think, okay, cool, I can do that job, right? And then you get a number of applicants who actually have no experience whatsoever, specifically with respect to fraud, waste, abuse, and systemic investigations. So that's ultimately what we found in the first release of the application. We saw the need. Again, we also got input from the monitoring team that we needed to make a targeted approach with applications. We did that, and we ultimately found applicants that were more uniquely qualified despite getting a lower number of applicants. And then I personally can't speak to the salary. Again, that goes within the budget of the Department of Public Safety. And perhaps with the position being vacant for as long as it's been vacant, I can't speak to any changes in the budget there. But again, I can say or confirm that the city is committed to making sure that the Inspector General role and function is supported to be able to handle its responsibilities.
Thank you. We have a question that has been emailed, so do you have it, or?
Yes, I didn't know how do we handle this, but we had a comment emailed to us. Should we read it or? Okay. So this is from Latanya Gosby, and it says, I am unable to attend tonight's meeting, but I wanted to submit my comment in hopes that someone would read it or respond. Thank you. I encourage you to begin a discussion with CPRB about the location of their monthly meetings. We have stated several times that this meeting is not held during a time that accommodates the community to engage in public comments. 9 a.m. downtown Cleveland City Hall is not conducive for the community. You all should encourage the CPRB to get out into the community, hold their meetings with the public at least twice monthly. The CPRB is still out of compliance with the mandates of Charter Section 115, and they still don't have an updated manual. Secondly, I want to talk about the Police Inspector General presentation. I'm not sure how far in advance you all received this information to prepare for the interview, but from a community perspective, this process was rushed. There was no real engagement with the community prior to you all making recommendations to hire or not hire. Over half of the commission didn't engage with the candidate by asking questions, so the commission looked like it was unprepared to conduct the interview. Because of the way the public comment section was set up, there was no real way to ensure that community input would be implemented into the recommendation process. No one on the commission questioned the changes in the language of the job description to ensure that the consent decree mandates were being applied, or why the position was expanded to include fire, EMS, AC and AC, and corrections when the consent decree only applies to CDP. We submitted a letter to the city, the judge, and all CPC commissioners with our concerns about the police inspector general's position, which we hope you all will read because we are awaiting a response. We, the community, depend on all of you to be the voice of the community. If you are not prepared, how can you represent the best interests of the community and the residents of Cleveland? This is from LaTanya Goldsby, president of Black Lives Matter Cleveland.
Are there any further comments from the community? We got Ms. Rosie.
Does it work? Okay. My name is Rosie Palfy, and as you know, I've been working on crisis intervention for the last 7.5 years. I was a member of the Mental Health Response Advisory Committee until the city took it over in December. So I've been asking for the last 18 months in a variety of meetings how crisis intervention is going to fit into all of this, okay? And I'm not saying that the CPC is responsible for giving answers, but somebody here has to be, and I hope they're paying attention. Speaking of job descriptions, the description for Dr. Anderson's job, and this is not a criticism of her, okay? This is the city. It talks about the areas that she's going to be working in, and it talks about OPS and the CPC, but the Mental Health Response Advisory Committee is not mentioned. I don't think crisis intervention was mentioned, but like I hear about super stakeholders, and I know that our committee did not even feel like actual stakeholders. So I just want to remind everybody that's the only area that does not fall under the police commission as the settlement agreement was originally written. At the end of November, MRAC members received a draft memorandum from the Division of Police Monitoring Team entitled Monitoring Team Review of CIT Cases Involving Handcuffing of Female Juvenile Results. So it's 16 pages, it's extremely impressive. And the reason why I'm talking to you about this today is because I want you to know that this is what happens when you have an advisory committee with no power. So they identified, well, first of all, in most of the cases, the officers acted appropriately. They were courteous, and it's well documented. It was an impressive body of work. Dr. Dunn, Professor Bell Hardaway were there to give us the presentation. So anyway, at least 5 encounters were deemed to be problematic. And 2 cases where the assessors observed some type of bias. So in one case, a black female police officer told a black juvenile female subject that she was going to call her Becky because she had a lot of, and then she spelled out white privilege. When the juvenile asked and said, "What? Say it again?" The officer said, "No, because my camera's on." She did, however, go on to add that the subject acts like a lot of these Caucasian kids that grow up with a silver spoon in their mouth. You know, the ones out here getting people killed because they feel like they're entitled to stuff. Second case involved a 10-year-old who complained of abuse against her mother. Now, we're talking about black female juveniles, okay? This was a black male officer. Forgive my language, I'm reading from this report. The officer described the juvenile as, quote, acting like a jackass. And case number 3 involved a non-black youth. Officers went to great lengths to walk with the teenager while talking to her and building rapport as they reminded her they had been to her house before. She was given great latitude to walk out of their eyesight into the house despite her father's objections. All of this occurred as officers reportedly witnessed her cutting herself on the street with a pair of scissors. In case number 4, involved a black female officer and a black female subject. Both cases, the officers adopted a combination of familial tough love and scared straight approach. In this incident, it resulted in the officer advising and coaching a mother to relinquish custody of her child to the Division of Children and Family Services, which the parent did. And there's another case in here that's also problematic, but I believe these cases should have been forwarded for discipline. And this impressive report did include policy recommendations, but there was no will among this committee to do anything about it, at least not publicly. Behind the scenes, they were asking if these officers would be disciplined. So I just want you to remember that traumatized youth are going to become traumatized adults, okay? And so these are the kind of things that if you guys don't get involved, it's just going to be swept under the rug. Thanks.
Are there any further comments from the community at this time?
Yeah, I just want to take a moment and thank you, Rosie, for that. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, just to double back on something from before, I know that we're no New York City, but I just wanted to mention quickly that the in 2014, the Inspector General of the NYPD, which is just the one department, was given a salary of $193,000 and $788. I'm flustered, so I'm saying words wrong. $193,788 a year, and that's for just the one department, which is enormous, and he oversees quite a lot. So, just wanting to just note the difference in the exact same job for a different city, and just a wildly different salary range there, and that's all.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Wang wanted to say something.
Thank you. So I just wanted to address the comment that was sent in by LaTanya Gosby. I had sent out, we were aware of these discrepancies between the job descriptions. It was obviously a process for members of the commission to process this information. So I would agree with her that if we had more preparation, and that's of no blame to our hiring committee, but so I think that we are, and we were also not seated as a commission at all when many of these events had occurred. So I do want to say that we're watching this, and we are watching this actively, and we were actively engaged on this issue, and but obviously the support from the community is doubly appreciated, and this, I think, goes to the point of multiple oversight would be great, because there's a lot of moving parts here, there's a lot of details that could fall through the cracks, but this is why we welcome the continued engagement of the community. Thank you.
Any further comments from the community? Hence none, we're going to move forward with our next portion of the agenda, which is that we will hear the report of the Executive Director given by Jason Goodrick.
Good evening, Commissioners. So just a couple of quick points about public feedback on your Inspector General interview process. So we did make a point to solicit public feedback as best we could during that process. We advertised as much time as we had. We mentioned that all public comment will be included, and kept our word on that. So we gave people as much time as reasonably possible by the deadline that was given us by the city for feedback to provide some. And to Ms. Goldsby's point from Black Lives Matter Cleveland, we expected a letter from them and even extended the time, particularly knowing that additional feedback was coming. So I just want to make clear that we weren't excluding any feedback or attempting to reduce the amount of feedback in any way. And the letter from Black Lives Matter was forwarded as part of our information as a packet to Dr. Anderson and the affiliates at the city who were expecting it, along with any other particular pieces of feedback we received, which unfortunately only happened to be one other one along with the chat that was in that session. So it doesn't mean we're closed to feedback. We take feedback about any issue at any time, and that is always shared. It is never kept. We include it in whatever process we are able to, and it's disseminated to commissioners whenever it is received. So people are always able to send us feedback, even if it seems like it's past the point of feedback for any particular issue. We're always open and available to that. So I just want to also say thank you for extending my time period in this position last week. I much appreciate it, and giving this team a chance to continue to perform for all of you moving forward. So just a quick note on that. And then I think you should also take a moment to congratulate yourselves a little bit here. You know, this Inspector General thing came up quickly. You were able to respond to it. You've done a lot of training up to this point, and tonight, you know, some of the points that were raised and the questions that were asked shows that you're learning fast, you're communicating, you're getting up to speed on issues that many people have been working on for 6-7 years now or longer. So, you know, you should congratulate yourselves to be able to perform at this level at this time. I think that you've received some critical community feedback, and that's part of the democratic process, right? The community should be critical of you, but I don't want you to feel like you're not progressing well, because from my perspective, I think you're really far ahead of the curve for only being seated for several months at this point. So I hope you take a moment to just enjoy that moment, because I'm saying it. I wouldn't say it if I didn't think it was true. So. So what's happening in the city and our office particularly, I'll start with that. Since the beginning, people have mentioned we need an attorney on staff. As we know, we tried for a budget that would include full-time attorney with benefits. It didn't work out at the council level and got put on the floor, so we're well aware of that situation. But that doesn't mean we don't have money to do that, so we are working to create a job description around what we can afford with an attorney, and it's okay. I think we obviously have a need for an attorney in the future, and we're working quickly as we can. So I did meet with the Department of Law and Mr. Spencer Thomas and Chief Legal Officer for the city, Mark Griffin, to discuss what the obligations are for attorneys, what level of capacity this attorney should have, and present some options. So that was a week ago. I will follow up tomorrow to see what their opinion is. It doesn't mean they have the final say on it, but to be efficient with taxpayer money, we want to see what our opportunities are, how other departments hire attorneys, and what the charter says, depending on what the work the attorney does in the job description, what obligations they have, and reporting to the law department. So it is not as simple as just putting a job description out there. We have to be mindful of the charter and look at how the process goes. So we're expecting feedback on that soon to start the process. We also, I'm trying to accelerate as quickly as I can our vacancy of a front office manager and finance coordinator. It goes through a lengthy approval process, and I check in regularly with them to make sure that it's moving along. As you know, the head of HR has separated a while ago, and I think that slowed down their operation a little bit. So working as fast as we can to do that. You may have heard or seen, some of you have already met him, but Mr. Marcus Perez was started this month as the OPS administrator. So we have made contact from staff to Mr. Perez and have opened ourselves up to meet. I will hopefully have an opportunity to sit down with Mr. Perez in the near future, and then we'll extend an invite when he's comfortable to come here. I mean, obviously, I don't think he knows enough to answer every one of your thoughtful questions at this point, so I want to give him a chance to get up to speed with his job and what's actually going on before he appears before us. But it's on the radar. And then just a couple of things, so the public is aware and you're all aware. I shared a sheet that tracks our information requests to the city so that we can keep tabs on it. You may have heard or read or learned at this point that there is a process that was previously ordered by Judge Oliver when dealing with requests, including a timeline. It's more detailed than I'll go into here, but they have a period of time where they can contest the request if they don't request it. And this was pre-15, keep in mind, so there are other things locally that kind of trump that, but when it comes to consent decree related material, there is a process. And it's typically 21 days unless it's agreed longer or there was a conversation about it, so keep that in mind. After we passed the rule that outlines our first steps for achieving the 115 objective of creating a list of officers who meet the Brady-Giglio integrity criteria, I immediately made a request on your behalf to the City of Cleveland for all Brady-Giglio letters that have been sent from the county prosecutor since the inception of that process. That request was made on 4/17/23 via email, and it was sent to all of the leadership involved in that, including the law director and the safety director, the chief of police, and others in the division. And to date, the only response we have received is that they're unable to take action on that request at this time because Safety Director Howard is on military leave. The next request that was made was from Commissioner Wang for all Inspector General applications. And Mr. Donaldson, to the point that was in the letter earlier, Mr. Donaldson, through the hiring committee, had requested a bunch of information about the Inspector General, the job description, applicants, all those things, and we did receive that in a timely manner from the city related to that. So there was some process of exploration before we did that interview. But the Inspector General applications were provided within 1 day from Dr. Anderson, so thank you for that. And then there was a report from the previous commission, and I have a copy of it here. There was a recent news story that the city is moving forward with purchasing automated license plate readers and 9 drones, which will be used for public safety, specifically to the Division of Police. On May 9th of 2022, the predecessors to this commission had a work group and released a report about emerging surveillance use by Cleveland Division of Police based on a work group of experts and commissioners at the time, and this had never received a formal response. So it was asked, since we know that additional technology that was addressed in this report is being procured, there was a request for an update if there are any general police orders related to these things, or what's called divisional notices, which are memos. They're not quite the level of a GPO, but they're kind of an interim between GPO updates that provide guidance around these specific technologies. There were 5 specific requests, but basically any updates on this and any policy that would guide drones or automated license plate readers. We did receive, including ShotSpotter, which is something that has also been expanded. We did receive the GPO for ShotSpotter. We were also told that there were no GPOs for drones at this time or automated license plate readers, and that any additional information will be forthcoming. So it's not a closed request yet, but there has been partially met at this point through Dr. Anderson's office. So that's the update that I have for you regarding where we are with moving forward in the work as you start to build your committees. So thank you.
Thank you. We will hear the report of the Internal Training Committee given by the co-chairs, Alana, Garret, oh, Commissioner Earley? Oh, I'm sorry.
So to the executive director, is there, and I know that we have a budget, but if off the top of your head, could you let us know what the budget was for the attorney, for a full-time attorney for us?
So I don't have the number in front of me. So what we asked for in salaries was about $240,000 additional money. So just to be clear on the attorney, this is one thing you'll notice if you go to the city's website right now for hiring. A great deal of those jobs are for attorneys. So I don't want to make any false promises. There are a lot of attorney jobs at the city right now that are going unfilled for whatever reason. So we may be facing some type of market challenge with this position. But long story short, we didn't get that extra money, which would have been probably close to between $150,000 and $200,000 for a full-time attorney with benefits based on what I see most attorneys paid. But the good thing about our money budget for this year for part-time, right, even if we got more than 20 hours a week out of this person, I don't think we're going to have a budget shortfall in personnel because we've had vacancies for so long this year already that we have what I would call a reserve in our personnel money. So I think that even if we spent up to $50,000 on an attorney in man-hour or labor this year, we would be okay.
Second question is, when we talk about the drones and the license plates readers, am I clear that I heard you say there are no GPOs or official policies centered around that from CPD at this moment?
That is correct. There were no responsive records to the request for what we were told is they don't yet exist or they don't have them. Specifically for unmanned aerial aircraft, unmanned ground vehicles, which are also drones, but they're on the ground. They do use those in certain circumstances. They may not have them right now, but it was worth the request. And then around automated license plate readers, which they have and are using on loan from the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department at the time of this report, but without policy to guide their use at all.
So is first step, sorry, Madam Chair, and I'm done. I know this is unusual for me. So with that being said, is it, when you say the city is moving forward on this particular policy, what is the steps when you talk about moving forward? Is it the recommendation of the previous CPC, or is it GPOs first and then putting this out? What does that process look like?
The request is moving forward. I don't have any confirmation that they are working on a policy, that they have a plan to design policies or any of these things yet. So there has been no formal reply to the specific things in this report or the specific recommendations in this report from the city. And that's why, as we form our committees, this is an example of how you could pick up right where other people have worked off and carry that work forward to make sure that what was recommended actually comes true.
Did you have a question? Oh, Commissioner Garret Ferguson.
Can you share the copy of the GPO for the shot spotters with us? And then I know you said that they are in the process of purchasing, and then you said for the automatic license plate readers, they have already begun using those, but they are not already using the drones. Is that correct?
So they are purchasing more drones. The city does have some drones, and they may have used other drones on loan in the past. So it's not the first time that the city is obtaining drones. But at the time that we had this work group together, they did not have a policy to guide them for either the drones or the automated license plate readers, which they were also using at the time. So, and yes, I will provide, it just came, so on that spreadsheet that you have, they will go into a shared drive that everyone can see, and it'll list on the tracker spreadsheet the link to where it exists in our shared drive. So if you just give me a moment, I will get that out to you. It's only been like a day or two since I received it, and I just haven't had a moment to update where it is and update everyone that we have it, and here's the situation.
I don't know if they've shared this information or if you can get it, but is there any geographical data that they have sent out to show what communities, what areas in the city that they are utilizing? Do we have any of that information?
So what we know about the automated license plate readers are they're mobile, but we don't have the specific, we haven't made a request for where they've been deployed at this point. So no, they're also, they can be vehicle mounted or similar to the stationary units that you see that will display your vehicle speed that you can move around certain cities to like as a speed mitigation thing. They can move cameras, APLs to different locations as mobile units as well. So I don't know the specifics of the ones they're planning on procuring, whether they'll be vehicle mounted, which means a patrol car. You'll see patrol cars that look like kind of those Google recording cars that drive around. If you've ever seen Google Maps use those cars, they're just mounted with tons of strange looking cameras. If APLs are deployed on vehicles, that's typically what they look like. They'll have all kinds of tech on the front, top, and rear of the vehicle. So I don't know the specifics on the contract, the company that they're procuring them from, and what type they are, because they come in many different forms.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for the interest of time, we're going to move to the next committee report. We will hear the report of the Internal Training Committee given by co-chairs Garret, Ferguson, and Commissioner Earley.
I think most of us were notified. Our next full all-day training is being moved to Saturday, June 3rd. It was originally planned to be scheduled for May 20th, but that is the day that we are having the trauma and youth policing event that we also encourage all of the community to come out to if you are able to. The conversation series have been great. We've had one that focused on Black women, one that focused on Black men, and now our next one is focusing on youth and the trauma with police. And so that is May 20th. We want to encourage you all, but our next training then is being moved to Saturday, June 3rd. That is all from our committee.
Thank you.
I'd also like to extend, on behalf of both of us, I didn't share this with you, Alana, but it makes sense. If you feel that you have not been fully trained in a particular area, or that we need more training in a particular area, if you could let us know so that we can set that up. I think the biggest benefit that we've had as a commission is the constant training that we've been having. And what I've learned from this process is that we will never stop learning. So any area that you feel that we need to revisit or visit more immediately, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. We will hear the report of the budget and grants given by Chair John Adams.
Thank you, Chair. So we are making progress on the Budget and Grants Committee. So currently we have an application that I know that, thank you to Commissioner Van Leer, and I think Commissioner Zayed, who's been working with Ms. Williams and the staff, and Sarah Anderson to help complete the application. So we do have a pretty solid draft of the application. I think there's a few items that may need to be added for clarification, but we are shooting for a May 15th. We're still shooting for May 15th. We may be if we don't make May 15th, it'll be close. But the application is pretty close to being done. It's modeled after the Neighbor Up applications. And so where we sort of are right now is I had a conversation with Ms. Williams yesterday, and we are in the process of translating that application into Arabic, Spanish, and Mandarin. So we're going to try, we're going to make that happen. And then also, I think that I'll let Commissioner Van Leer, but I think he's in the process of helping us to sort of flush out some of the meanings of, just to kind of help the community about like what exactly do we mean by restorative justice, sort of what exactly is the push behind the mediation and the violence prevention program. So there will be some clarification provided there. We also got a clarification email from the legal department about the grants and sort of if the changes that were made to Charter 115, if somehow there's any conflict with what the practices of the city in terms of like, particularly a councilman was curious about, sort of there's been this back and forth about anything over $50,000 and going to the council. But it appears that there really isn't much conflict there, and we would go to the council if that were to happen. But right now, I think our goal is to, you know, as our first year, we kind of decided as a committee that it might be best to start a little smaller, kind of get the hang of things, and then maybe evaluate because this is going to be a tighter, shorter cycle, and it's our first time. So that shouldn't be an issue. And then lastly, where we want to do some sort of a community push. So where we are in next steps for the committee is we have to decide on these informational sessions and sort of strategically pick where we want to have those sessions in the city. And what we're hoping is that we'll be able to maybe help guide some of the community people through the applications, or at least give them a lot of guidance to kind of support them, because, you know, we don't know who is going to apply. We want to make sure that community members have an opportunity to really get these grants to help the community. So we will be figuring out sort of like when, where, and sort of what the structure of those informational sessions will be, but we want to provide that support for the community. And then just lastly, the applications, like I said, they are supposed to open on May 15th. And then those applications will stay open till July 1st. And then we would like to review them and score them and vote on them by the 31st of August. And our goal is that by October 1st, all of the contracts and everything for the grants will be settled and signed. So that's sort of where we are with the process of the grants. And then I wanted to also share this committee report with Commissioner Van Leer, because he might have some things he wants to add. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Yeah, largely what you said is where we're at. I would say one correction or one addition is that we had hoped to get this launched by May 15th. We're now looking at May 22nd as the proposed launch date. We just need extra time to develop some of the literature and go through a little bit more of the process. But otherwise, I think largely we're done with the landing page and the grant application PDF version and evaluation sheets. Still finalizing work on the grant workshop so that the community has the opportunity, as you mentioned, and some other promotional materials, and as you also mentioned, the translation. So the only other addition I would say is that, based on, some of the community conversations in the work team, we looked at, encouraging, sort of looking at the grant requests ranging from $500 to $50,000, no more than $50,000, but adding some language, that requests above $50,000 would be considered, but acknowledging that there could be a longer approval process based on the conversations we've had. So otherwise that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. We will now hear the Rules Committee given by Co-Chair Wang.
Thank you. So we met and we were able to pass 2 more additional rules. The first rule is an amendment, and it regards 1.44 about our leadership. If the audience would like me to read the entire section, I can. If not, I will just read the sections that are just for the interest of time. Would anybody like to hear the entire section? No? Okay, great. So this section is about how we select our chair and what the chairs and co-chairs will do. The only change that we have are to their powers in acting as ex officio members of all committees, so I will read that section. It is preferred that committees described below are seated voluntarily. However, in order to ensure essential business of the Commission's mission is conducted, the co-chair shall appoint as necessary committees and ex officio be a member of all committees. Ex officio for co-chairs is defined in these rules as follows. Co-chairs have the right to attend and speak as if they are a committee member at all committee meetings, except meetings dealing with nominations or elections of co-chairs. Attendance is discretionary. Co-chairs cannot introduce motions or vote in committee meetings. And lastly, co-chairs do not count in the number for determining a quorum or whether a quorum is present at a committee meeting. So I now make a motion to adopt the amendments to section 1.4.4 of our bylaws. Do I have a second in an up or down vote? Or there, and then I guess, am I
Second.
open discussion?
I'll second that motion.
Pete seconds, so.
So you want me to do it?
Yeah.
The question is on the adoption of 1.4.4 of the bylaws to amend ex officio language of the co-chairs. Any question or debate at this time? Any question or debate? Commissioner Earley.
I can be a little slow sometimes. For clarity, does this mean now that co-chairs outside of voting can serve? Because it still sounds like you're serving on a committee.
Well, we will be on the meeting. We can attend the meeting, maybe to talk and discuss, but we cannot vote. We cannot count on a quorum.
Sorry,
Chair
sorry,
Wang.
this was, maybe this will clarify, this was to, since we had adopted Robert's rules as our rules for our bylaws, we didn't realize that in Robert's rules, ex officio members also had the right to vote and make motions, and that was not our intent. So we were just curing this through an amendment.
And it's just for the subcommittees. Any further question or debate? Hence none, we're going to call for the vote. Commissioner Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Benito?
Aye.
Commissioner Schura? Aye. Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Earley? Aye. Commissioner Garret Ferguson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy? Aye. Commissioner Chair Ridgeway? Sorry. Aye. Commissioner Van Leer?
Aye.
Chair Rodriguez? Aye. Commissioner Wang?
Aye.
Motion carried. The adoption is on 1.4.4 of the bylaws on the ex officio language to read as read.
Thank you so much. So we have one other new part of our administrative procedures. It's labeled 2.x because we're not sure about which section it will be, but it regards public speaking, commentary, and media relations. People that have been paying attention to this, we previously had tabled this administrative procedure for further discussion in committee. We went through 2 rounds of discussion in committee, so I think that was a very thorough discussion. And we're now bringing back this new language. And I'm just going to read, if it's okay, the new language that was amended to this administrative procedure. The concern was whose signatures would be on what type of documents. So the language that has been added is all written statements and reports having been publicly discussed and voted upon by members of the commission as stipulated in the commission's bylaws shall be understood to represent the commission as a whole. Reports shall contain only the names of the individuals, including commissioners, who contributed to the work. This is for reports that would happen in a work group or something similar. Letters or statements voted on at a full commission meeting shall contain the names and/or signatures of all commissioners. And finally, press releases shall be identified as originating from and representing, quote, the Cleveland Community Police Commission, unquote. So I now make a motion to adopt all of 2.x regarding public speaking, commentary, and media relations. I put it to a vote.
So we would
We
need
need
a
a second.
second. So, yeah, the question is on the adoption of 2.x, public speaking, commentary, and media relations of the bylaws. Is there a second?
I second.
Any question or debate at this time? Do we have any question or debate at this time? Hence none, we're going to call for the vote. Commissioner Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Benito?
Aye.
Commissioner Schura? Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Earley? Commissioner Garret Ferguson?
Nay.
Okay. Commissioner Kennedy? Chair Ridgeway?
Aye.
Commissioner Pete Van Leer?
Aye.
Chair Rodriguez? Aye. Commissioner Wang?
I will abstain because I think the
3, 4, 5,
the part is insufficient, but I do not want to stand in the way of the group moving forward, so I will abstain. Thank you.
So it appears that we have 9, motion carried. It stands as read for 2.x, public speaking, commentary, and media relations. Thank you so much. The next item of the agenda, we will hear the report of the hiring committee given by Chair Donaldson.
All right, thank you, everyone. I will make this really quick. So the Public Safety Inspector General interview, of course, was last week. Thank you for the co-chairs, Jason, also Dr. Anderson and Delante for making sure that process went as smooth as possible. The report has been sent to Dr. Anderson. Right now we are experiencing some technical issues, so the report will be made available to the public next week. And then the other thing I will add is that the hiring committee is now composed of myself, Commissioner Earley, Commissioner Benito, and then Commissioner Van Leer, and we will be meeting for the first time on Monday, the 22nd at 6 p.m. So definitely come out and, join us. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item of business is old business and its establishment of the new committees. Basically, to just provide an overview, Google Doodle went out for commissioners to list their preferences. That information was received. If there was any conflict, we tried to ensure that it was fair and impartial and receive input from the commissioners. These were the results. So for policy, we have Commissioner Benito, Van Leer, Earley, Commissioner Garret Ferguson, and Commissioner Wang. For accounting, we have Commissioner Shura, Commissioner Zayed, Commissioner Benito, Commissioner Wang, and Commissioner Adams. For outreach, we have Commissioner Reeves, Commissioner Kennedy, Commissioner Zayed, Commissioner Garret Ferguson, as well as Commissioner Earley. For training, we have Commissioner Donaldson, Commissioner Reeves, Commissioner Shura, Commissioner Adams. Are there any questions at this time? Chair Ridgeway?
Just for the record, when this motion was made, all the standing committees should have been listed for sign-ups, because there may have been people on existing committees that may have wanted to switch. So that poll was limited only to new committees. So when this passes, for the record, every standing committee's members need to be part of the minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the motion read that it would be all the standing committees, not just the 4 new committees. Mm-hmm. And so people didn't have that opportunity to switch from an existing committee to a new committee if they had wanted to. So we just need to know who's on every committee, and each member of the commission also needs that information.
Thank you. We can create a document to ensure that all of the committees are listed, and that can be emailed as soon as possible. Commissioner Wang?
I'm sorry, I had to add, because the Rules Committee, the 2 co-chairs came from the Rules Committee. We do have 2 new members, and they're the ones that approached me, was Commissioner Van Leer and Commissioner Zayed. I think we have 1 committee, Budget and Grants, that's still over capacity, so I'd be happy to volunteer to leave that committee so now we will be.
Glad that worked out. That's easy peasy.
That's a lot of committees, so if that will, so I think we're
appreciate
now
that.
hopefully in compliance with that, so thank you.
Commissioner Donaldson?
I also want to add that when the hiring committee was initially established, there were 8 of us who expressed interest in being on that committee. And so after the link went out for us to then pick other committees, I followed up by sending an email to everyone who was not included in that initial number to make sure that, that I had conversations with them about their interest on the hiring committee, and that's how Commissioner Earley joined the hiring committee as well.
Thank you so much, but just so we are clear, a formal document will be sent so that we're all on the same page and we have clarification. Is there any further discussion on that? Hence none. Is there any further discussion? because I think that's the end. Any new business at this time? Oh, Commissioner Benito.
Just so that we're all clear, with the previous committees that we've already been serving on, or I guess generally, can maybe we clarify for the group what the process is if somebody were to want to leave a committee? I'm not asking for any particular reason, but just for clarity.
You can message the chair, and you can let them know of your desire, and you could take it from there, but I don't foresee any issues. I will start with the chair, so they're aware, because as the co-chair, we do not want to overstep, and if there's any kind of conflict or concerns, normally that's what we go in, but hopefully the committees are self-running and self-governing, and we are here for support.
Chair, one last comment. I don't think we need to say this, but those committees do need to meet. You need to select your chair. And once you have determined a date and time for your regular meeting, you know, if you could just let the co-chairs know, so that becomes part of the record as well.
Are we not supposed to meet until June or July for the police?
Okay, the way the bylaws read, once this list has been approved, when it comes out of this body, it's 15 days before it takes effect. So it would make it, what,
Wait, after
June?
training.
Yeah.
In June sometime, yeah.
If I could just add to that, so you guys made an agreement in the bylaws to finish your training before you actually met. It doesn't mean you can't logistically start to plan your meetings. Also, you still have 2 meetings a month for 1 more month. So logistics and hours-wise, it's probably best if you set a regular schedule for these committees through the end of the year for at least once a month. If you need more than that, fine. But what we're trying to do by July is have an entire year's schedule of committees worked out so that the public knows where, when you're going to meet, and it should be more regular than some of the temporary committees have been meeting now. The rules, yes, 15 days after we publish the minutes in your bylaws. But for this committee establishment, you're established, and if you want to move, the important reason if you're going to leave a committee to note that you're leaving a committee is for quorum purposes. So if you formally ask the chair to leave the committee, that way it changes the numbers of the committee. Otherwise, you're in absence. So,
Commissioner Garret Ferguson.
So just to clarify, it's established for 15 days, but we cannot meet until after training. Is that what you said?
you guys had made an agreement in the bylaws, right, to finish the training or 90 days from the passage, whichever comes first. So that was timed with July. You know, if the committee feels an absolute necessity to meet, I don't think anyone's going to resist in June or even May. But you do have in your bylaws that you'll wait 90 days from the passage of the bylaws before you'll form these committees and your training. So
Is that the passage of all bylaws? Because we still are.
the passage of that section, that particular section, yeah.
Okay.
And let's just read it since it's up for
Okay.
debate. So, you'll give me a minute here. Is our bylaws online? I don't know if we have
They're
them
not
up yet.
complete. Our bylaws are not complete.
Some of the section,
Or the policies and
the first
procedures.
part of the manual was passed, and I don't know if it's up on the website yet, but
Yeah,
we'll
the-
get it up
the-
if it's not.
If I can
It's
ask.
no big deal to put them
The
up.
bylaws, with the exception of, I think we have one outstanding issue with law. Sorry to ask you, Delonte, again, if we cross signals, but that was an issue of law. It has been finalized, so, but I think what we're saying is that 15 days from this date, these things will go active, but there is also a rule that says 90 days or after training.
And that 90 days started from April.
So the passage was March 8th when we did it, so 90 days from March 8th, or when we complete the minimum amount of training agreed in the training committee. So you're getting close to that. Yeah, yeah.
So we have Commissioner Earley.
To the chairs and to the rest of the commission, under new business, one of the things that I wanted to highlight is something we just heard when it comes to the use of the license plate reader and the drones. And I'm a bit concerned because we are having operation and policy done with no GPOs in place, right, when it comes to this particular issue. So I would ask for us as a commission to consider bringing the responsible parties to our commission so that we can get an understanding of how these particular things are operating with no policy or procedure in place. I think that the community deserves an answer on that, and we do as well. Lastly, I do, and we don't have to tackle this at this meeting, I do want to answer on why we need to go to council for the approval of $50,000. It seems like I do understand that. I do understand it's an ordinance. I think my concern is a bigger, broader concern, which is as we talk about independence and being a separate body, it continues to seem like we rely on the city for so much. Now, Delonte and them are doing a great job. Can we give it up for them, please? Thank you, thank you, thank you. So this is not a criticism of them, but it is to uphold the power and authority that we have. And so at some point, I'm looking for us to begin to break away and have some independence, and possibly even looking at that ordinance change for future commissioners, as we all should have the right to be able to give resources to the community as we see fit with a fair and transparent process. Thank you.
Any further new business? Commissioner Garret Ferguson.
So I just wanted to follow up with about some of the comments that our community member Rosie Palfy brought up about what has happened with some of our youth, in particular our Black girls, and kind of move forward with the commission doing more work to figure out what has happened with those complaints. Have they ever been referred to CPRB? But just bringing that up and acknowledging it, we know that that is a problem and that we would like to move to work further to figure out the best issues, especially seeing how we, on the 20th, is having an event centered around youth and trauma, but to make sure that we are highlighting this issue of how Black girls are being treated by CPD, because that seems to be a reoccurring problem, and that's something that's not always highlighted, as we most of the time are only talking about police shootings when we talk about police misconduct. So just wanting to bring that to the forefront, and that hopefully as we are establishing these new committees, that can be something that we are tackling in one of the committees.
Commissioner Adams.
To the chair, I just wanted to follow up with Commissioner Earley. I mean, literally, it's just the law. And I mean, I think I've been fairly vocal about my concerns about making sure that we remain independent. So I share your concerns on that. I think at this point, you know, all of this is new. We sort of don't know how this is going to go. It may be a really great working relationship with the city council, but right now we're just kind of we have to follow the law. So that's where we are. But I do think that, you know, we're going to learn a lot this year, particularly with these grants. And it's possible that we may decide that maybe we do need to propose some structural changes, or we just don't know what we don't know yet. So I'm going to take a leap of faith and hope that the city council is trying to work with us to help us to serve the community. And I think that if it turns out that it's otherwise, and I think that there are some other, some other options that we might pursue, but I think it is important to try to act in good faith and then hope that it works out. And if it doesn't, then I think we just recalibrate and we just figure out what we're going to do to make sure we serve the community.
Commissioner Wang.
So I did serve in the Budget and Grants Committee. I did just want to say that, you know, as we take this leap of faith, we could still make sure that the people in the community that have these great ideas can be taken care of. So I had suggested maybe we meet with whatever committee deals with this in City Council, get the criteria that they look at, to assess whether these 50,000 plus contracts can go through, so everyone is on the same page and we can share that information with our applicants so they can include that. And I do, want to suggest that there is like a double-edged sword with transparency. There are, having this in some ways, I can understand the concerns about our independence, but having it go in a public body is also good for transparency because the community sees the grants that has a lot of money, attached to it. 50,000 is quite a bit. It's more than most, I think, people make in a year in Cleveland. So we do want to be mindful that we have that transparency for the community too. Thank you.
Just, I would say the final comment on this. We are not the only independent agency whose budget falls under city government. If you look at the 13, I think it's it's the 13th piece under the consent decree, our budget is a separate line item, but it's still under the city. I don't know where we think we're going to get money from if we don't work with the city. It doesn't limit our independence, and that was the question I had raised earlier about our concept of independence in terms of the collaboration or correlation that we have with other city departments or city agencies or the city executive branch or whatever. But it says that we have a separate line item, and having been sitting in the police review board, their budget is under the city. So we are not any different, and yet we're all independent. And I think the one thing that makes us independent more than anything else is that authority that has been granted in terms of our oversight with the police department. That more than anything else, I believe, is what makes us more independent than the previous commissions. But we're no different than anybody else when it comes to how our budget is in line with the city's budget. And I think that was part of our discussion when we went before the Public Safety Committee with Councilman Polensik a couple of weeks ago as well.
Thank you so much. We are all learning how to navigate this and how to work with the various stakeholders as well as maintain our independence. I think this was very fruitful conversation, but it is 8:24, so I'm assuming no further questions. Thank you for attending and tuning in. May your light shine bright and you continue to find your path of resistance. The meeting is adjourned.